Island is the largest island in the contiguous United States. The Haven, located just outside the coveted New York City, measures 118 miles long, with a vertical distance of just 23 miles. Within this picturesque slice of heaven resides 7,869,820 ambitious, young, vivacious American citizens. The idyllic northern coastline has been home to Manhattan billionaires and socialites alike. The rocky shores and sprawling estates have been the muse for multiple film classics. The glamorized Hamptons are synonymous with prosperity and elegance. But the island is also diverse, seemingly rich in culture, with a demographic of 20.4% Black and 20.5% Hispanic. Although those statistics may seem promising for a diverse and progressive community, that assumption is false. Behind the thick facade of wealth and beauty is a dangerous, false sense of naivety and progress.
So I'm from New York City, specifically Manhattan. As we all know, that Manhattan can tend to be a very diverse area. I'm also a part of the LGBTQ community. I'm starting to identify more as queer, gay, bisexual, I'm not necessarily sure how to pinpoint that.
For such a seemingly diverse community, you would think that widespread discrimination, especially of marginalized communities, would be a thing of the past. But that's false.
So I guess this whole journey technically started in middle school, unfortunately. That was the first time I've ever been encountered with an issue regarding my race. I was in U.S. history class, and honestly, it just seemed like a perfect day. And then when the bell rings, I'm with my friend going to lunch, and then this person, he comes up to me, he hits me with a protractor, and he says, "You N-word." I'm like, is he serious? Did he really just say that just now? Then I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna disregard that. And then he comes back again at lunchtime. He calls me the N-word again and hits me with a pencil. So I took the pencil and I hit him back with it because okay, now you're physically abusing me and I'm not gonna take that. Then the last time it happened, this is when teachers finally get involved. I find it to this day mind-boggling that no one happened to see this. It's where were you guys in the hallways when this was happening? So I'm playing kickball with my friend and a bunch of our other friends. And for the final time, he comes up to me and he was like, "Hey, you N-word." And he chucks the kickball in my face and I got dazed. So I'm like, okay. Now I was pissed. So then we're in a fist fight. And then the dean broke us up. The dean, he just automatically assumed that I was in the wrong in that situation.
Discrimination against Black Americans and other marginalized races have had a rampant increase in the last decade. Within state lines, Long Island contains 291 communities, but most of its Black residents live in just 11 of those municipalities. In fact, a 2010 census report ranked Nassau County in the top 100 most segregated counties in the U.S. But structural racism is not the only symptom of a community suffering from widespread discrimination. Other marginalized groups, such as the LGBTQ+ community, have been victim to discrimination for over a century.
I am from the Five Towns. I grew up in Woodmere. I spent college primarily in New Orleans at Tulane University, except for my Hurricane Katrina semester, which I spent at NYU. And then I went to law school in New York City at New York Law School. I came out as gay when I was maybe 11 or so. I was in middle school. Then I met some trans people and I realized that my stuff, all of the things that I was having issues with and all of the feelings and all that was not necessarily related to my sexual orientation, but was more about my gender identity. I didn't change my name until I was 29. It was 2017, which is not that long ago, 2016 maybe. So that's kind of my whole trajectory. But I would say that me coming out, I think because we do live in one of those kind of faux progressive areas where it looks good on paper to support the LGBTQ community, or, I benefited from tokenization. it was novel and exciting that they had someone to kind of point to be like, we're friends with this person, or, we're supporting this person. And so I think it is not like that in every community.
So I had, I don't want to call him a friend, and I feel weird calling him an acquaintance. Was like one of the only gay people, at least openly gay people, that I knew. So I was speaking to him, and then we started growing like an incredible friendship. But ultimately, I'm not gonna give the other guys names. They started calling us. They started posting stuff on social media. They started saying things during class.
Similar to the issues we face with racism, discrimination against the LGBTQ+ community can be traced back to the structure of our society. Aspects like education and community and institutional programs are broken, lacking in representation from these marginalized groups.
Yeah, there are going to be things that are a pain in the butt. If you're non-binary, forms are never going to say what you need them to say. Systems are not set up for LGBTQ people. You don't have to confront systems constantly if you are not in the LGBTQ community, or if you're not multiply marginalized in a way that, you're going to need to utilize public assistance or disability benefits or something like that. And I think that one of the really important things to know about trans people is that there are as many ways to be trans and as many trans experiences as there are trans people. There are a million reasons why people might not access those things, whether it's cost, safety, maybe their family will disown them, their insurance doesn't cover it, they can't be out at work.
So I felt like in middle school was primarily me fighting like race issues, and then in high school was me primarily fighting queer issues with toxic masculinity and internalized homophobia. Our country and our world revolves around this Eurocentric heterosexual male perspective, rather than understand that there is a multitude of perspectives that come in play to our society. We're constantly referring back to this one perspective as if it's the norm. We're only taught about primarily Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, and we're not even taught about Malcolm X, because our school system unfortunately teaches us a history that's very, for lack of better words, once again, submissive, rather than the true violence and the true nature of our past. Rather than explain why we were enslaved, why Christopher Columbus discovered America. I can go on for days about all the things that are taught in such a Eurocentric perspective.
I think it's not good for the general population, and it's not good for the community to not have a mechanism to get that information. And I think that the more people are out and are able to have these conversations, the more they are serving as role models and possibility models for not only young people, but also their families, their parents. So I think that there are still a lot of things that need to be worked on. And I do think there is still a false sense of like, oh, we're totally good and we treat everyone, beautifully and nobody has a problem here. I guess maybe things are better. I think people think about it sooner. I think there's a ways to go with bullying. I think there's a ways to go with unsupportive faculty members and staff members, administration. So there's always going to be more work to do.
We should all feel deserved and respected and expressing the right to just being our whole selves, and that never be limited by anything, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, identity, sexuality, ableism, religion, or any other identities that we so choose. Even if we're indoors all the time, even if we have to be 6 feet apart, that doesn't mean that we're no longer connected. And I feel like everything that we're doing, for instance, with this call, with the work that I'm doing on campus, it exemplifies this identity celebratory narrative. And that identity by no means should define our possibilities or our potential. Rather, it should be given the space to thrive. My hope is that we can continue to tell the world that the boundaries that we've put in place have created this faulty sense of safety that we absolutely must dismantle.
But discrimination on Long Island is not solely based on race, gender identity, or sexuality, but also on religion. In 2018, 72% of hate crimes on Long Island were based on religion. But in a broader perspective, acts of violence in relation to general discrimination across the New York metro region have increased by 7% last year. At the end of the day, these are just two stories. In our research, we could have interviewed a wide array of survivors, but the message would all be the same. Yes, Long Island and the tri-state area is a seemingly alluring sanctuary, but behind the curtain is a broken system. We as a community need to come together and fill the cracks in our society. Discrimination affects all minorities and marginalized groups. It's our duty to end racial, sexual, religious, and LGBTQ+ discrimination in our own backyards before we can dismantle the problems across our nation. Injustice in Our Backyard was written and produced by 3 passionate students and artists who strive to spark change in everything they do.
There's no justice, there's no peace, so we've taken to the streets, telling hatred that its time is up. And together we will stand, undivided, hand in hand. We will fight and we will rise up, holding signs up in the street, broken branches 'neath our feet, roaring screams.